in here. Tonight we are going to be making our sourdough loaves. We have a traditional, like a basic, and then we have a chive and Dubliner cheese one to kind of go with our Irish theme. And then we're going to be making a Guinness chocolate cupcakes with some Bailey's Irish cream frosting, which is one of my favorite frostings. So let's start by getting our sourdough in the oven. So we had these in the fridge. They're doing their cold proofing. And then I've had my Dutch ovens heating up in the oven for the last hour at 500 degrees. So we're going to flip this guy out. This is our chive and Dubliner. Let me just scoot it over. That's fine. Didn't quite make it in the middle of mine. And we're going to just do our kind of our square. And then let's do a cross in here and make it a little fun today. You know, I know there's people who like put a lot of work in their scoring. To me, I just want it to taste good when it turns out. I'll put this right down here. They're very hot. Remember, our Dutch ovens are like 500 degrees since we had them warming for the last hour, and they're made of cast iron. So they're going to retain that heat in there. So always use your oven mitt. I'm going to pop this on, and then let's get our next one. This is our basic or our plain sourdough. Super simple recipe, you know, just 500 grams of flour, 375 grams of warm water, 100 grams of active starter, and 2 teaspoons of salt. So let's give it a nice score. And let's do our little slits down the end. There we go. And I'm going to just score that one a little bit farther. Easy, just a basic kind of wheat leaf score. And we're going to take our lid off here. Very, very hot. I'm going to put my loaf one in my oval Dutch roaster, which is like the perfect size. So we'll have a nice oval loaf. And then I'm going to pop these in my oven at 500 degrees for 20 minutes. Then we'll take off the lid and we'll bake them for another 15, 20 minutes at between 450 and 500. Beautiful. Nice and hot and toasty in there. Okay, let's start on our Guinness chocolate cake. Okay, so we are going to start by adding 1 cup of Guinness, which is probably about half of this because this is a pint. Ooh, I am not the biggest fan of Guinness, but in a chocolate cake, it tastes delicious. So we're going to measure out 1 cup of Guinness. There we go. Boo. Perfect. So we're going to add that. And then we are going to add 10 tablespoons of butter, which is 1 stick and 2 tablespoons. And this is going to be for our Guinness chocolate cupcakes. And we just put our sourdough in the oven. And we're going to make so we have these, they're going to be a lovely chocolate. You don't actually taste so much of the beer. It just has a nice flavor profile to it. Comment that they love your two-tone cabinet. Oh, yes. Thinking of doing that for their kitchen. Yes, you know what? My previous kitchen before we renovated it was all white, and I could not keep my bottom cabinets clean at all because of like with my kids and everything. So I was like, I'm going to do a darker cabinet on there. And I wanted to do, you know, a wood, but I had to keep it in my budget. So this is actually a stained wood, but not like a, you know, super high quality, but it's a slate stain on it. So apparently it's stronger and doesn't nick as easily as painted wood. And when you get really close to it, you can see the wood graining, and it has like a slate stain on it, which makes like a really dark gray. There we go. So we've got my 2 tablespoons of butter in there. So it was 10 tablespoons, so a stick plus 2, because there's 8 in a stick. And we're going to warm this Guinness until it starts to melt. And then we're going to add in 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder. And this is to make kind of our chocolate paste for our Guinness cake. Let me get this. I'm going to get a paper towel because there's Guinness in there and all my cocoa powder will stick to that if I don't dry it out. And no need to make another dish. Say, tonight we're just doing our bread and our cake stream because we went to a baseball game and we ate at the baseball game today. It was crazy. 5 kids at a baseball game. You know, my older 2 were wonderful. My middle one was actually pretty good too. My younger 2, not so much. The 15-month-old, Mr. Jack, he actually was not too bad for a 15-month-old and not really understanding, you know, everything. My 3, almost 4-year-old had a little rough time because we wouldn't let him have like 20 packets of ketchup on his hot dog. And he was very sad that he couldn't have 20 packets of ketchup. So we had a little meltdown there, but everyone was like, "Oh, Mom, are you going to cook up the bread?" They're all hungry because, you know, you only eat so much at a baseball game. Let me cut out. I'm trying to get out. My measuring cup here has inside it, there's a line that shows me like a half, a fourth, and a 3/4. So I was like trying to get it perfect with our cocoa powder because you want to have your chocolate cake have just the right amount of chocolate. Can't skimp on it. And I'm using, I love Ghirardelli. It's one of my favorite chocolates. I love their chocolate chips, but I'm using their cocoa powder because I think Ghirardelli just has a slightly different taste. I love it. I remember back when I was a kid, it was like the really fancy chocolate where you couldn't buy everywhere at the time. Now you can get Ghirardelli everywhere, but my mom used to go to San Francisco and they had a store there and she used to always bring us back Ghirardelli from the store. I'm going to move this over to my smaller one. There we go. So we're melting the butter into our Guinness. And so that's 10 sticks of butter into our cup of Guinness. And now we're going to add, 10 tablespoons, not 10 sticks of butter. That would be a lot of butter. So 10 tablespoons of butter, which is 1 stick plus 2 tablespoons. There's 8 tablespoons in a stick. And we're going to put it in here and we're going to stir it together. And there we go. We're just going to mix it in here with the butter that is melting down for our cake. And the Guinness and the chocolate just work really well together. And I will say, even if you don't like Guinness, like I'm not a huge fan of Guinness beer, but in this cake, it's like delicious. I made this a couple other times before for St. Patrick's Day. It's actually a recipe from the New York Times. And it's just absolutely delicious. And I always find sometimes when you use like ingredients in different ways, like you wouldn't expect Guinness in a chocolate cake, but it works. It works well. There's also brownies that I've made with Guinness and they're delicious. And, you know, you always just got to like, whenever, you know, holidays are, and I over celebrate holidays. My husband says, I'm like, I go all out. We do all the bells and whistles and all the fun stuff. Kids have it. Yes. So we are baking it out, which means the alcohol, there will be no alcohol in it. You know, it's just like most people don't realize vanilla extract is actually just vanilla soaked in alcohol. But when you bake things or heat them, all the alcohol comes out. And Guinness, is like a beer, is pretty low in alcohol content. So yes, kids can have it. And you know, all my kids love it because it really just tastes like a really nice chocolate cake. Okay. So we've got our Guinness, we've got the cocoa powder completely melted, and we've got the butter melted. So now we are going to add 2 cups of sugar to our Guinness mixture. So let me get, and this is where our cake's going to get their sweetness to it. So let me there. And this will just help it kind of dissolve a little bit in there. So we've got our 2 cups of sugar to our Guinness, and we're our 2 cups of sugar to our Guinness, and we're gonna, And I've got my heat turned off, so we're done. You just have the heat just enough to melt the butter. There we go. And because you don't want to get it too hot, because we're going to be adding some eggs and sour cream. And if you have things too hot, you'll curdle your eggs too quickly. And you don't want that to happen. Okay, beautiful.
You have a question? Do you cook every day?
Pretty much every day. Now there are times where we'll go out to eat or whatnot. Like I didn't cook dinner tonight because we went out to a baseball game, but I did cook lunch. I mean, we've got a big family, so yes, I've got to cook for my family every single day. There is no vacation from it. Except when we go on a cruise, then I don't have to cook at all. But that doesn't happen often. We just went on a cruise for Christmas, a 7-day one to the Caribbean, and it was wonderful. It was always nice because it's not just no cooking, but it's no cleaning up either. Okay, so we've got our 2 cups of sugar in our Guinness with our cocoa powder and our butter. And now we're going to add in a tablespoon of vanilla. And I'm just keeping all of my wet ingredients in one because it's just easier to mix it that way than to try to mix all of them together. There we go. So we've got our vanilla. I'm going to stir that around. And then in this bowl, we're going to start with our flour and we're going to add some baking soda. So we're going to use 2 cups of flour. So all-purpose flour. You don't need cake flour for this, just all-purpose works well. You don't want to use bread flour or self-rising flour. So just all-purpose. So we want 2 cups of this. So 1 and 2. And then we are going to add in 2.5 teaspoons of baking soda. And this will be the rising agent for our Guinness chocolate cupcakes. We have a little bit of eggs, but this is going to help with the beer. It's all going to work together. You've got your organic chemistry lesson going on here. So the beer will react with the baking soda, which will also react with the eggs for the rising agent in our cupcakes. So we want 2.5 teaspoons of baking soda, not baking powder. So that's 2. And then a half more. There you go. And then this recipe originally did not call for salt, but I find that all baked goods taste just a pinch better with a little bit of salt. So we are going to add in a half teaspoon of salt. So one thing you actually hear a lot on cooking shows, he forgot to put the salt in it. And it really does make a difference because salt is a flavor enhancer and it really does help bring out some of the sweeter flavors in foods. Okay, we're going to put my whisks in here and we're just going to mix up our baking soda and our salt and our flour together to incorporate them so that when we add the wet mixture to it, it's going to be, well mixed. And I'm just doing this instead of sifting because it works just as well. And a lot of times I will add my baking soda into my liquids, like with a cookie, to kind of cut out of this step of sifting the flour. But with cakes, I find that you need to kind of do them out there because the chemical reactions start and you want to wait until you're getting that in your oven. Okay, now we need, let me get this, we're going to have 2 eggs and we're going to have 3/4 cup of sour cream. So let me get this. I'm going to try to, I don't have much sour cream in this one left. And I'm going to just use it in my cup here because even though there's cocoa powder in it, it's fine. The cocoa powder is already in the cake. No need to make another thing dirty. Always surprised when you have like 1 tablespoon of sour cream left. So we're going to put our sour cream in here. And this is going to help be really moist for it. And again, you need 3/4 of a cup. Okay. There we go. So we're good with our sour cream. And we're going to add this into our mixture here. Again, because we're going to want all of our liquid mixture together, and then we'll slowly add that to it. And I'm going to add my eggs last because I want this mixture to cool down as much as possible, because you don't want your eggs to curdle when you add it. And by adding the cold sour cream, it will help drastically cool this down, which will be perfect. So we're going to give it a nice stir. You can already see that it's got a nice chocolatey velvetyness to it. And that's the sour cream right there. We're just mixing it in. We doesn't have to be completely mixed because we'll mix that with our whipping, but enough to kind of cool it down. A little too fast. I'm a messy cook, I will say that. It's because I'm not a patient cook. Okay, let's get our 2 eggs. We're going to beat these up in a small bowl first, and then we'll add them to our wet mixture, and then we'll pour the wet mixture into our dry mixture for our Guinness chocolate cupcakes. So we've got our 1 egg and little shell and 2 eggs. And I'm going to just beat this first because it's just a little bit easier when I have a big thing of liquid to have these pre-beaten. And it doesn't take long. You just have to use a quick fork, 30 seconds, beat it. Doesn't have to be completely whipped. There we go. And we're just going to mix it up and stir it. Right now. And now I'm going to stir it over in case any decides to spill over in here. We're just going to add this to our flour mixture, and we will mix. You can mix with a spoon, or you could, I'm going to just use my beaters, and I'm going to beat them real quick. You don't want to overbeat your mixture because you don't want your eggs to fluff up too much. But a good 30 seconds to a minute on with your medium speed will work great. You could also do it with hand if you want to. There we go. Now we'll mix it around until everything is well incorporated. This will be delicious. I will say the Guinness, I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like Guinness or things. It just enhances it, and it makes, this is a very moist chocolate cake, or the cupcakes. You can do it in a cake form too. That just takes a little bit longer to bake, but it is just delicious. Beautiful. Okay, so you can see we've got it nice and whipped. Oh, I'm sorry, Bruni. And then I'm just going to take the spatula I use with my chocolate and just make sure there isn't any flour pockets on the bottom of my bowl, because sometimes when you're whipping, you'll miss a whole flour pocket.
You got a comment, they've never seen a quiet mixer.
Oh, yes, that is actually, so this is noise canceling so that you guys don't have to listen to all the beating and mixing, because we realized that sometimes when we were cooking, sauteing, and without a noise canceling on the microphone, it sounds so loud. And we didn't realize it at first. And then we watched through and I was like, oh, we've got to do something about that, because there's one thing about nice, background noises, but you don't want to be listening to something like the whole time. So, ha ha ha. Very funny, very funny. Okay. We've got ours. I wish I had green, but I did not have green, and I wasn't about to go out and buy more cupcake things because I have a bajillion of them. So just pretend they're green to be along with the festive holidays. We've got the nice Guinness chocolate cake, and I'm just going to spoon this batter in to each one of our things. Normally, when I use butter, we have a much thicker batter because it's not melted as much. But this one, there we go. We're just going to do a pour. And then we'll go back over. So this recipe should make about a dozen or so cupcakes, or one 9-inch cake if you want to use it in a cake thing. I do have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. There we go. Trying to be as clean as possible with this, but I'll just go over with a paper towel when I'm done. But it makes, so if you wanted to make a big cake with this, you'd want to double it or at least 1.5 it. This bowl is surprisingly heavy. There we go. Whoop. And then I'm going to go back over and spoon a little bit in each one because I do want them to be equal in size. There we go. Looks like this will actually make a lot more than a dozen cupcakes. So we'll pop one in a small cake pan as well. But I'm a fan of, when, you know, given the option between a cake and a cupcake, I prefer a cupcake all day because it's an already a pre-serving size. You can pick it up and you can go with it. You don't need to cut yourself a slice, you know, on a plate and use a fork. There we go. And I'm also the person who never fills their cupcakes 3/4 of the way. It is full to the top, gives you that beautiful dome on there. Now, one thing we'll do is we'll just, if you get a little spillage, because who has the time to put it in a piping bag, just take a little paper towel, run it along and clean it up. This is mainly to save you from cleaning up more when it's baked on and harder. It doesn't change any of the effects of baking.
You have a question? What is Guinness?
Guinness is a dark Irish beer, or a stout beer. This is Guinness. It is, yes, it's a dark beer. I'll pour it out in the cup. I personally am not a fan of it, but I'm also not a fan of any beer. I never liked it, never grew the taste to it. But my mom loves Guinness, and so we always buy it for her to have at not Thanksgiving, at St. Patrick's Day. Okay, let me grab, I'm going to just grab a small little cake dish right here. And we'll just do 2 mini cakes. That'll be perfect. So let me get my non-stick in here. And then whenever you're doing cakes, what I do is I just take my parchment paper. I'm going to take a sheet here. I'm going to fold it in half because look, and then I'm just going to cut a circle. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you lay that on the bottom of it, and then your cake will fall out effortlessly every time. It won't break or anything like that, because you can easily go around the sides of it with a knife, but you can't get underneath it. So this, as long as it covers like the majority of it, apparently my circles are bigger. But as long as it, I'm just cut a little smaller because you want it to rest in there flat. It doesn't have to go to the circle, but it will make it perfect drop out every time. There we go. And then what I do to get these to stick instantly instead of doing a like fold up is you just do a quick little pre-spray, and then you pop it down. And then of course you still want to spray your cake mold because the sides. And I use the baking spray that has flour in it, and it works great. The one from Pam works fabulous. I know Williams and Sonoma, I fell for the trick once and I bought their expensive like $15 can one. It's the same as Pam, just a fancy name. So Pam works great. Or you can butter it and dust it with a little flour. Okay, let's pour this in, and we're going to get these in the oven baking, and then we'll take the lids off of our cake, or our breads underneath so you can see it. So we're going to pour, and we'll pour. This will be like a cute little cake. These are, I know they're like little cake pans, but they're actually deep dish pizza pans. But I use them all the time to make small cakes because again, our family, we prefer to have cupcakes, but on like my kid's birthday, I do like them to have their own specialty cake. So we'll make a small cake to go with our cupcakes. There we go. Now we're gonna go pop these in the oven. So we've got our cupcakes and our Guinness things. And I do have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. Or put them down here on the middle rack. Now for the cupcakes, these are only going to take about 15 or so minutes to bake. So the perfect time to bake while we make our frosting. The cakes take a little bit longer. So let me set my timer for 15 minutes and we'll check on them. But while I have you over here, let's pull out our pots out of here. We're going to take the lids off. Whew, nice and hot. And there we go. Pop it up. So they've been in for about 20 minutes at 500. You can see they've got their nice pop here. And now you take off the lid. They're very hot. And then you put them back in for another 15, 20 minutes until it has the coloring that you like. Now, we bake them with the lids on because it traps in the heat and the moisture, which leads to just a great bread. So check my time so I know what time to come pick them out. Put that right here. Okay, let's work on our frosting now. Clean up my area over here. This is just a super simple frosting that we're going to be making. It's a buttercream, but we're going to add a little bit of Bailey's Irish cream just to give it kind of that nice, if you've ever had Bailey's Irish cream, it's a very mild coffee flavored liqueur, but it adds a really lovely touch to my buttercream frosting. And it will pair well with our Irish theme because you've got the Guinness chocolate cake with the Bailey's Irish cream frosting. So we're going to use powdered sugar and we're going to use 2 sticks of salt or of salted butter. I like to use salted butter in my frosting because I think the slight saltiness in the butter just leads to a more decadent frosting. You know, we're richer. I feel it cuts through. It gives you that great chocolate taste without being like overly sweet. It pairs nice. Okay, so this is room temperature butter. I have it softened because it's the best way for it to whip is at room temperature. So we're going to start it and we're going to have it start whipping in here. And I always like to whip it up a little bit before I add my sugar, just so it gets a little bit easier incorporated. Okay, so I've got it everywhere now. And now we're going to start with one at a time, 1 cup of confectioner sugar or powdered sugar at a time. And we'll whip it in there. Let me get my spatula because we'll want to push down the butter on the sides. Now you don't want to put too much powdered sugar in there at a time because what happens when you turn on your mixer, and you'll have a little cloud. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my spatula and I'm just going to push any of the butter down. And I like to use a hand mixer for, or in a hand, like a stand mixer for frostings because I feel like it works just a little bit better, especially with the whip attachment. Okay. I'm going to add our next cup. I always like to wait until I can see it kind of combined it or in like where it's integrated and starts to get a little coarse so that I'm not dealing with so much powder that then poofs out. Okay. And now we are going to add in some Bailey's Irish Cream. We're going to add in a fourth of a cup, and this will help everything come together. You don't add too much, just a fourth of a cup in here. And I make these at night, and by the time we serve them in the morning, like I'll probably have a cupcake night by the time my kids get them, all the alcohol that is in the Bailey's will have evaporated out. Alcohol doesn't stay in.
Do you make everything homemade?
I most of the time. There are a couple of things that I will like. I really love Ghirardelli's triple threat brownies in the box, so I will make those from a box sometimes when I'm in a rush. But I do make most of my stuff homemade. Okay. Now we can see the Bailey's has wetted down our thing, which is perfect because now we need to add in a bit more powdered sugar. We're going to use about 4 cups total. I typically, when I'm making frosting, it's about 2 cups of powdered sugar per stick of butter, give or take. So we'll whip that in, but I go little by little because I want the consistency to be right. And if you add too much powdered sugar, then it gets overly sweet and can be a little crunchy, and I want it to be nice and soft and fluffy for our cupcakes, which is whipping up nicely. There. We're going to get ready to add in our next cup. And then before we add in this next cup, I'm just going to always go along the side and push it down because I will say the butter will always cling to the side. And I find that happens more. This is a KitchenAid Pro series, which is slightly bigger than their standard series. And it's not the best for making small batch stuff. So I do find that things will stick to the side a bit more. I do love this because we have a big family, and so the big works for us because we do double recipes a lot, because a single batch of a recipe literally is a single serve for our whole family. But it does make it hard if you're making like a small batch or like whipping up a small amount of eggs. The smaller version works much better. Okay. Now you can see it's whipping up nicely. I like to whip my mixture really well because it incorporates the air into it and it gives you a really light and fluffy mixture instead of a thick frosting. I like the light and fluffy frosting. Put this right over here since we're done with that. Oh, beautiful. Okay, I'm going to turn it down and I'm just going to bring it lower because that way I can really scrape the frosting off on the sides. And then we're going to check on it, see if I need to add any more sugar or whatnot. I might need to add a little bit more. We'll have to see. Sometimes when you add a bit of liquid to yours, you need a little bit more to stand. Maybe a pinch more sugar. So we'll add 1 more cup and we'll whip it up just because you want it to have like a balance to it. And I did add a fourth of a cup versus like a lot of times with like when you add a flavor like vanilla, you'll only add a tablespoon. So I added a bit more liquid, which means you need just a pinch more to give the nice body to the frosting. Another great frosting that you can serve with this, if you're not like, say you don't like Bailey's or, you want to try something out, is a cream cheese frosting. You could do a cream cheese frosting, which would just be using like an 8-ounce pack of cream cheese, a stick of butter, and about 4 cups of powdered sugar and a tablespoon of vanilla. That would make a great frosting as well. Perfect. We're going to whip this up lovely. We're going to let the air incorporate into it nicely. And then let's see. We've got about 5 minutes left on our cupcakes. So they're just about done. Now we're going to really whip in the air to make it a nice fluffy cupcake. Okay. And perfect. So now you can see we've got our frosting all the way around. I'm going to put it off, and then we're going to put it in a piping bag so that we can pipe it on our cupcakes. I'm going to shake it off some. It always gets a little stuck, but you don't want to waste any of your good frosting. Beautiful. Put it right over here. It's delicious. Okay. So here we have our beautiful frosting. Now I'm going to put it in a piping bag. I don't use a piping thing. I just use the piping bag to squeeze it out. But I find you can use a Ziploc baggie at home if you don't have one. I used to do that all the time before I just bought a bulk set of piping bags. So let me go grab one of those. So what I would always do before I, just finally caved in and bought one of these was just a like gallon size or quart size Ziploc baggie. And you just do the same thing. You scoop your frosting into it, and then you just cut off one tip of it, and then you squeeze it out. And that just gives you that kind of nicer than if you were trying to do like the knife. You know how everybody used to do it in the 90s, where you literally just used a knife to spread on your frosting. Piping it out just gives you that more finished look. So we fill up our bag. I will say, filling up a bag sometimes is a pain. I know there's like the hack where you lay it out on like saran wrap, and then you like twist it into a log and you put it in there and you cut, but it doesn't take much work here. So let's scoop this all the way out. We want to make sure we get all of this delicious Bailey's frosting out. Beautiful. And let's pop it in here. Okay. I'm going to shake it down. And this is where you just, with the piping bag, you're going to twist at the top. And then what you're going to do is you're going to work it down here. And then what we'll do is when we're ready to pipe, we're going to cut it off at the end. But let me put this bowl in there. And we have just about a few minutes left on our cupcakes. Out in no time. Okay, let's check. Let's check all our bread. So a quick recap, and feel free, guys, if you have any questions to ask us. But we made our Guinness chocolate cake we used our Guinness beer. So we got to have our little touch back to Ireland. I'll pour this out in a glass because a lot of people asked what Guinness is, and it is a really dark and creamy beer. So you can see how it almost looks like soda. And it's a little bit flat since I opened it up at the beginning of it, but it is a very dark beer. I'm not a fan of it, but doesn't mean other people don't love it. It tastes great in a chocolate cake. So we used a cup of that with 10 tablespoons of butter and 3/4 cup of cocoa powder and 2 cups of sugar. We melted those and mixed them up together and like kind of almost formed a nice soupy chocolate. Then we added in 2 eggs, 3/4 cup of sour cream, a tablespoon of vanilla. So that was all of our wet ingredients. And then on our dry ingredients, we had 2 cups of flour that we added 2.5 teaspoons of baking soda to and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Gave that a nice stir. We poured our wet ingredients into our dry ingredients, and boom, we have our cupcakes that are just about to come out. But our bread is ready to come out. So let me clear this off, and then we're going to pull our bread out. But it's going to be hot, so let me clear this so we have plenty of room. I always say, I'm a messy cook, but when you're cooking, it's all about the process. It's like art. Do you want a craft at the end that everyone's look the same, or do you want beauty and magic? I always say beauty and magic, and that's just my excuse for being a messy cook, because it's beauty. Okay, let's get our things out here and let's bring out our breads because they are ready. They had a nice golden crust on them. Okay. Whew. Nice and steamy. So here's our first one. I'm gonna pull them out. This was our Dubliner and chives. Roll that off. Beautiful. And I want to show you guys the crust on the bottom of this. We have this lovely crust on the bottom. Beautiful. And now let's get our traditional. I'm going to turn this oven off because it is roasting me. And this is our basic sourdough loaf. Beautiful. So these are our 2 sourdoughs. Aren't they gorgeous? Woo, give them a nice spin. So again, we have this one as our Dubliner with chives, which Dubliner cheese is like a cheddar cheese. And then this is our traditional. It's beautiful. Okay, let's go check on our cupcakes because it's about to beep. Perfect timing. Okay, so now we've got our Guinness cupcakes about to come out. Let's look at these. Beautiful. And you have our chocolate cake right there. I'm going to give them a quick touch. These feel done to me. Perfect. So this is our Guinness chocolate cupcakes. My little cakes need a few more minutes to cook, but since these are ready, we can show you. I'm going to put them right here. And I'm not going to frost all of them because if I frost them right now, they will melt. But I will frost one. Let me turn off this timer. So I'm going to take one out and I'm going to frost it. But like I said, if you are making cupcakes at home, you need to wait until, let me get a spoon to scoop that out because it is hot. You want to wait until you're at home or they've cooled down. So that is very hot, but we'll give it a nice frosting. So what I do with my pastry bag is I'm just going to cut the tip off. I'm not putting in any special tip at all. I'm going to slowly work my frosting down, and this is our Bailey's cream frosting. So I'm going to eat this cupcake, and it will taste delicious with melted frosting on it. And we're just going to do a nice swirl. Perfect. And that is our Guinness chocolate cupcakes. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And also feel free to send us a message or comment if you have any cooking questions or if you have any recipes that you would like to see. But we had fun. This is going to be a great treat, especially for me in a little bit and for my kids when they wake up. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.